got the program, I flipped through the program, and there are about 5 other papers I found that are right on this topic.
Perfect.
So I will try to send you photos or something of those program pages, and or I guess what I'm saying, this is new hot stuff. You're not going to find much in the American Political Science Review published. I mean, that takes years.
Right.
But you may find some people who've got, and people who are ahead of us in terms of, that is, you found one woman who's done the congressional categories. I'm simply saying, I bet there are 10 other people who've done the same kind of thing if we look more carefully. So look is what I'm saying.
All right, I'll have to comb through that and see what I can find. In terms of stuff I've been reading, so Antoine and I have been discussing what literature I'm supposed to be reviewing. I spent the last week looking at some communications literature that he suggested I look at. One of the things I was looking at was just trying to better understand, there seems to be obviously 2 sides to the equation, how the politicians are behaving and then how the citizens themselves are using the medium. So one of the things I've been exploring is looking at models of online citizenship and participation, how citizens engage, what they look for when they're engaging, and trying to sort of synthesize the literature on that.
Correct.
I'm also looking at literature on the medium of Facebook and how, from a mass communication standpoint, the way politicians communicate to mass audiences has shifted over time. To understand, a lot of the articles that use terms like agenda setting, they had used it in a different context, because back in the 70s or the 80s, it was used differently. Now that we've got social media, we have a different phenomena where people are participating in establishing which stories get sent around more than before. Instead of having the media set what people focus on, the people themselves to some extent participate in that process, and it's different. So I'm trying to delineate those and organize my understanding of that more carefully so I can build a model that will make sense. I'm also working with, in my social science.
Okay, slowly. I mean, that's huge. How are you getting into that literature?
Well, I mean, I started off by just looking at it conceptually. I now need to see if I can find some quantitative models that actually do analysis involving these concepts, which I haven't yet taken a step towards doing.
So you haven't started it, you're saying?
I mean, I've gotten enough background. I need to now find a quantitative model.
No, but I bet you can find 250 papers on this.
Yes, that's what I need to do in the next week. And by Sunday, I have to have a paper, first draft, done of one of these models for my social science class. So I'm going to have this done fairly quickly. In my social science class, I'm pursuing a multivariate regression, and I need to come up with a model that involves these topics, and I haven't yet gotten it all together, but this is the general direction I'm going.
Well, do you need to include citizens as well as leaders for that paper so soon? Or that is,
no, not necessarily.
What you've already done is leaders, and that is. I guess I'm saying, be careful. I mean, you have a background in economics.
Sure.
You haven't had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 political science courses, which
right.
you really should have for doing this. So you're trying to catch up. Be careful about where you're really. I mean, you've got strength. Obviously, you've got lots of strength with your modeling, your data analysis, and so forth. But be careful about stepping on other people's toes. I mean, like the whole political science discipline. That basically is so. So I would say, think carefully where and how you can add something new and distinctive without obviously making some mistakes and overstay. So for instance, if you say you recognize there may be 200 papers and you haven't looked at them, if you did that in economics, what would they say to you? They're less polite in economics.
I've gotten a face full of that this week already.
All right.
I'm familiar with being criticized.
Okay. So I'm not trying to criticize. As you can see, I'm trying to help.
No, totally. So I need to identify some papers that I can build off of.
No, but wait. Do you need to look at the literature on average citizens at this stage?
No, I don't necessarily think so. I was just.
So are you sure you want to? Right.
No, I was just trying to get a feel for. As you said, I'm undereducated in political science, so reading someone that helped me better understand what I should focus on.
No, but there's a ton of work on leaders.
Yeah.
And most of it's on Congress,
congressional
senators, congressional leaders, maybe governors and mayors and so forth. And that's what you've got the data on. So I would say maybe, but why not start with that? And because that's where you've got your categories. That is, have you read the papers? I mean, I haven't. Have you read a paper or more by the woman who you keep citing?
Yeah, sure.
What she'd say? I mean, how does she use the same categories that you presented? You haven't mentioned anything from that.
Well, I mean, the paper that I used, or that I based mine on, I used the exact same categories that she used. I spoke with my professor.
I mean, that part is clear. How does she interpret them?
I mean, I can pull that up.
Have you read it?
Yes, I have
Okay,
read it.
Is it in your head?
I mean, in terms of the behavioral,
What she said? I mean, what's her topical book? You know, I just don't know.
you mean for each behavior?
Why does she? How does she use those the same categories you're using? That is, one advantage of that is you may be able to compare the mayors and the council members in the 3 cities with the converse. That is with her findings. For instance, does she find the same proportions of people dealing with local versus national issues? Does she find that is you have percentages using each of those 4 types?
I see. Yeah.
Is the relative proportion across those 4 types the same or different from what she's found in the U.S. Congress? And if so, why or why not?
Yep, those are some. I
mean, that's a straightforward political sciencey, descriptive, but building on on your measures, your data in ways that are directly cumulative. Maybe just starting with her paper.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. I don't know why. That's an excellent suggestion.
How does she interpret? I mean, does she use these in terms of political parties, in terms of region? How does she analyze those 4 things?
If I remember correctly, what she did was she took a set of, I think, a random sample of like 570 tweets from the sample of the congressional members that she had, and I don't remember. I think it was something like 300. I don't know what the exact numbers were. But after they coded those 570 tweets, and then the rest of them they ran the classifiers on. The only thing I really checked for in the paper when I was doing my study, because of the limited time, was that I checked for which was the highest quality classifier that they used, and applied it to my study to see how it would work. But I didn't.
Wait, highest quality in terms of what?
Reliability. Yeah.
And you can say in terms of the numbers of tweets covered, reliability.
I think in terms of accuracy.
Or meaningful interpretation in terms of a regression type model. And each of those are different criteria, conflicting criteria.
Yes.
So, or put differently, that is, if you just wanted more cases, you'd be working with citizens. But you've got a powerful. What as I've said to you and the others have heard me, maybe or maybe not. You have really innovated very neatly, and you've joined these national social media that are atomistic with the local places, and you've got the zip code data for. I mean, that's beautiful, and you thought of that, you implemented that largely on your own, but that solves our problem of joining these 2 sets of data in ways that this has real power, but we want to harness it and link it to substantive theories of interpreting the bigger patterns which we can now potentially access with these. So the question is what? Raw data from Twitter and then filtered through or categorized with what? That's the big methodological question that you've got. And the answer should depend in good part on the theory we want to test. So we've got a number of things that we've been talking about, but one thing is to try, and that is implicitly the sort of rough big idea which you had was, do these themes which are being discussed in the Twitter tweets by the council members and the mayors match up with the national discussion of politics around Trump and Hillary Clinton? And the striking answer was very, very minimally.
Correct.
And that was interesting. And nobody has replicated that because no one is, to my knowledge, maybe there's something in rough draft, but nobody's done what you've done. So you don't know a whole lot of political science, but you're doing some cutting edge research.
So you want me to focus on the leadership, and I need to make sure I point at that.
I wouldn't say necessarily, but I'm saying we want something original. This is a USC.
Correct.
Even though you guys are college students, but you're doing original path.
So what do you see as my most important next steps?
Read the paper by the woman who sent it to you.
Yeah.
And look, and maybe find one or two papers that deal with it. With say, if you can find anybody else that she cites, for instance, if she builds on, there's a ton of literature on Congress. That's where most of the empirical research is on decision making, stuff like this. And maybe the presidency. If you can find codes that are applied to presidents, fine too. And that's, so they're proud, and that's the other link, of course, to Trump. And so so I found a couple of papers on Trump at the Midwest. But if you keep searching, all of us guys keep searching for new papers on Trump, and anybody who's analyzing the social media part, that's where you can add power to what we're getting from the analyses of the others on other pieces of this about Trump, and more generally populist leaders around the world. So okay. So one question related to that is, how much do these new Twitter tweet kinds of things distinctly, do they, well, they seem to have quote, worked in the sense that he invested minimally in campaign advertising.
Correct.
But he used his ironic, acerbic, provocative style of tweeting to get massive media coverage for free.
Right.
So is that just how much? And so I'm sure there are going to be a ton of other candidates in the future who are going to try to do that. All right. So how did he do it? That's a sort of autobiographical question, but that is, what I've learned from I think from you and maybe some of the others, there are lots of council members and mayors in the U.S. who also are using Twitter.
Correct.
How are they doing it? Are there any? Have you found a single study of mayors or council members doing how they use Twitter?
Yeah, sure.
What? Okay, no, sorry, who?
Same woman.
No, she studied in conference with me.
She also did a separate. It wasn't like a full study, but she also wrote like a separate one on mayors and council members.
What did she say?
It was a conference paper, and I didn't really read it as fully.
Okay, I'd say then look at that if she's already made that comparison. And maybe she's touched on some of these things already, which is great.
Okay.
Let me pause for a second. How about our Trumpsters? Do you have any advice for these issues? Obviously where there are fundamental different directions which we could potentially go in, but anybody have advice or suggestion of something doable and specific, one small step at a time? Sam, Eric?
Maybe if you look at Trump, I don't know if it's possible to see like which types of tweets are like retweeted, or like I don't know the extent of like how much data you can get from Twitter, but like at least with regards to our project, maybe like for example, if certain locales retweeted
Trump,
like retweeted certain Trump quotes with certain, let's say like Trump talks about like immigration, if that was like retweeted in certain areas more, I don't know if that type of research could be.
that can be easily done. I can subset all the Trump tweets and then be able to run keyword analysis on the subset. Yep.
I have a suggestion. So you made it seem like local, political leaders aren't really acting in the same fashion as Trump, right? That's what you said.
Like
It's
they're
a
just
broad.
not discussing the issue
Right.
if you're judging it by Pearson correlation.
So I guess that makes me think, like, is the flip of it also true? Like, is there, like, how much variation is there between what they're tweeting? Are they tweeting basically like come out and support your local members at this event versus this event, or is there like a very significant amount of variation? Because if you see a lot of variation, then you can start talking about like home style and like Philip Converse, Fenos. Why is the variation? But that's right. Next.
I think that's excellent too. And I think that would fit with the theories a lot better, just in terms of being more connected to it, as opposed to just like the paper I did last quarter, is just basically like saying, here's data, and I don't really know what to do with it next. So.
Okay, good, I mean, good, excellent general point. How about joining Jonathan's suggestion with what we talked about earlier, comparing with the woman who studied the Congress? That is, how about looking at the degree to which the answers to those questions, that is responses, however you categorize them, maybe using her exact categories, how much are those, and what are the means? Are there differences in means between the Congress and the local officials? Are there differences between the mayors, or only 3 mayors, but the 3 mayors and the council members? And sometimes mayors are close, sometimes they're far from that council. Third, so you can look at means, then look at standard deviations and kurtosis. Okay, you know what? Everyone knows what kurtosis is. Probably even some of you Trumpsters, man. That is some very simple statistics are good to begin with. You Trumpster folks, or let's say you, Amanda and Jonathan, have jumped right to multiple regression, and you've left out. This is what I'm trying to get maybe Jonathan or maybe Amanda to do some simple, basic descriptive statistics and report those as well, so that the three others who are thinking more substantively can say, okay, so for instance, do congressmen answer like this if they're Democrats, and like this if they're Republicans, and do the local officials answer more like that, for instance? That is, does party have a bigger crystallizing effect for the congressional Democrats, congressional Republicans, than for the local officials? So just this could be the kurtosis score of each of these 3, or then run it separately for Chicago, New York, and LA.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that very simple statistics, but you need to do this kind of thing and know what these results look like before you can meaningfully do the more advanced statistics like regressions. And but that is one idea we've often put forward is that something like this is going on. Okay, so this is U.S. If we go to Europe, I mean the European system in the past, European and Japan, has been more like this, but the parties have even, that is, the U.S. system is sort of in between. So the U.S. might have these party differences, whereas the Europeans would be more. You could have a proportional representation with 4 different parties, and those 4 parties discipline their members if they deviate from those party programs. They won't select. I mean, they don't select them in the first place. They would kick them out if they vote on something else. Whereas the local system, you can run. I mean, Donald Trump is the most recent dramatic example. But in that sense, Donald Trump is acting like an American local politician. He's creating his own issues. He's saying, "The hell with the party." I mean, not completely. And now that he's elected, he's realized he's got to work with these party people. So he's making some big changes in the White House right now. But these are the classic kinds of things which political scientists do.
Yeah, and you do that in your book. Okay.
And it's simple.
Yeah.
But you need to have a sense of how this is working, and this helps then to say, how different is Trump from the past? You can't compare Trump until you have some simple ways of presenting the past ways of the key rules of the game. And the big simple key thing which has been used in most congressional research is party, political party. And in general, that falls apart at the local level. The parties explain less. But how much they explain has been is good to document, and that's a strength of your using the same tools as this woman has been using in Congress. So you can make this kind of comparison, and that will have appeal to political scientists who are mainly reading this kind of research for the U.S. Congress. So you can present those results, and if they've got it all there and you don't need to do this, and or you can reanalyze their data easily. This is the strength of your using the identical coding categories of what they already have.
Yeah, I didn't recognize that. That makes a lot of sense though.
Or put differently, if you're from Wuhan, China, and you say, I want to study Wuhan, China, and I want to do an ethnographic study and interview 5 people. You can interview 5 people and talk to them for 4 days each, 24 hours a day for 4 days, and get a lot of rich information. During those 4 days, you could give them a couple of questionnaires. And if you give 2 questionnaires to 4 people, you can then compare those answers to national samples of everyone in France, everyone in China, everyone in Japan, everyone in Korea, if you use the same questionnaires that have been used in other places. So I'm saying the same thing right here. But I'm making a more general point. Even if you go to one new city, one new country, one new research site, if you build on the fact that you've got something that is a comparable tool as you've got Ben, that is the power of this, is that it can be generalized if you do it in a way that's consistent with the way the data were collected by other people. And so even if you're studying one city or one neighborhood, in a sense, Heesun is studying Paris, Chicago, and Seoul, but she used the same tools, the same measures, the same kinds of data, so that she could then compare with all of France, all the US, all the Korean cities,
Yep.
and repeat the same analyses, and then show how they're the same or different. And the results are much more powerful than if she only had 3 cities.
Yeah.
And then she shows, how similar are French cities and Paris to Chicago and to Seoul. And in that way, we all have a richer understanding of how these things work. I wrote down for you, do you have, that is, I was rereading the Benjamin essay on Paris, which we didn't get to today, but basically, there's a great line in there about the flaneur. Only a line and a half. Do you remember that? Have you caught that? And I say this because it fits with what you presented. That is, before I caught that, you said this in your thesis, and you said it at the Midwest meetings, that the flaneur links to the idea of Bohemia. Benjamin says that directly.
Oh, from his essay?
Yes.
I don't remember the original quote.
That's my
I
point.
reinterpret.
Okay. And I'll get your page here. My spare time, I do research assistance for you folks here.
It's true.
And so Dan and I would always work together. He'd do something, and then I'd shift around, and whatever he'd do better, I'd do something different. Okay, so no, maybe I didn't print it here after all, but I do have it in my Word document, and it's pasted it right at the end. Page 21 of the Arcades of Paris book. This is I think the second edition. With Baudelaire, Paris becomes for the first time the subject of lyric poetry. This poetry of place is the opposite of all poetry of the soil. The gaze which the allegorical genius turns on the city betrays instead the alienation. Department stores, these are the last precincts of flânerie. in the intermediary station, in which it still has patrons, but it's starting to bend to the defense of the market, it constitutes la boheme. Page 21. I mean, so he writes a little bit affected by reading all that Baudelaire and style. Just for the record, he wrote the 2 drafts of this paper on Paris as a research. That is, he's working. He's got all these notes on the arcade project, and it wasn't a book. It wasn't published. He's a Jew in the 1930s, a very scary place to be writing. But this is a grant proposal which went to some well-placed guy in the U.S. He didn't get money, and we don't know how much that related. But you see, he committed suicide. He was trying to cross the Spanish border around 1939, 1940. So his writing about this stuff with death in mind is very personal.
Okay, I'll try to have some of this done by Monday.
Great. Anything else you want to? Anybody else have suggestions? You hear a lot of what I'm saying is very modest, very specific. Look for descriptive statistics before you go to multiple.
I think
Do you need to have a multiple regression by next week?
No, I just need to have an outline for where I'm planning to go into the theoretical causal model for.
No, but that's much bigger than what we're talking about then. So then, do you have a clue as to what you're going to say?
No, I'm not going to play tonight.
Okay, who has suggestions for that?
It'll be late night.
That is.
I need to have basically the introduction, an outline of the review, and
What can you political scientists say about a guy named David Easton, Easton? You know who he was and what he did? He's a professor here when I came here. He joined systems analysis with political science. The same thing was going on with Lazarsfeld, Merton, Talcott Parsons, and they all were saying, and there was a guy at MIT who worked on this stuff. And they talked about cybernetics, and they tried to build systems of how these things would work together. And they would do things like boxes like this. And I've been using this ever since. So if you have things like policy outputs, leadership, such as your tweets, then you've got back here city and citizen characteristics. Income, education, occupation, and so forth. And because you've joined these levels, you can do these, you can put these together. And these are also done a little more crisply than you've done it in the 2 papers I sent you by what's his name?
Tim. No.
Yeah, Tim. Yeah. So I'd say look at his models, and he's got regressions, and they're implicitly doing this kind of thing.
Okay.
And he's got specific variables here and here and here, as I recall. So I would say one model to look at is basically those 2 papers, but those in turn are a continuation of a lot of other work along these same lines. But Blakely.
I think it was City Money, if I remember correctly, that book that we read last quarter.
Yep.
One of the things I really liked about it was that I think it was chapter 1 of the intro that you very clearly stated the propositions that you were going to test in very specific terms, and I mean that's really what I'd like to strive for when I'm putting out what I'm going to test. So like if I had to pick like an example of the format that I'm looking for propositions that are stated in very precise language that are testable with causal models in a quantitative way, not ambiguous, not
is the right seat. Anybody have got a napkin, maybe a clean sheet of paper?
I can go get paper towels.
Actually, we have a general rule. If you're ill and especially coughing, you should really only be here in Skype. That is, you Trumpsters have gotten each other sick.
Yeah.
And we don't want to get everybody else sick.
Not anymore.
So maybe either move over there, or maybe, and we gotta let you talk a little bit, but you're coughing right on 3 of our key researchers. So maybe you 3 ought to move over here and not sit right in front of their coughs, or they should. Alas, I mean, when we used to have, in the old days, we didn't have machine readable, we didn't have coding, we didn't have electronic data files. We coded everything by hand. So we used to have, 15 more students. And what do you think happened when one person got a cold?
Oh, Lord,
Sorry,
I never thought of
Professor.
that.
Uh-huh.
Who coughed?
We've been through years of this.
My brother only
This is how I've gotten my top style for class. This is why we do YouTube. YouTube is there so you don't have to cough. That is, you can't cough in class. And so this is a smaller room than a classroom. So we got about 10 more minutes for that. So 10 more minutes for the Trumpsters to tell us anything on your mind. That is, I sent you. I thought you'd heard this before, but I did send you emails saying, my main concern for you Trumpsters is your health. I saw you guys at the hotels. You could barely talk to the audience. Your coughs were so bad. Okay, so you got to take care of your health, and health comes first. Second, health of other people comes second. You're putting it 10th. These 3 ladies in front of you, please move right now. I want you to, keep healthy, and you're sitting in front of lots of germs. You can laugh, but it's true. Okay.
Disease.
My entire apartment's sick at this point, so.
Oh, you're
Everyone's sick.
No, I'm not. All 3 of my roommates are though.
That means you're sick.
That means you're sick.
I don't feel sick, so it's not.
You're a carrier.
Okay. What do we have that the Trumpsters want to talk about?
Well, we've made some progress with the op-ed. We think it's ready for final round editing, and we also cut it down to the size required by the 10 kind of publications that we're interested in sending it to.
Fantastic.
And we also, you were asking us to kind of make the data section a little bit more clear inside our paper, and we were taking some comments from the NPSA. So we now have an appendix section inside our paper that has the syntax for most of the codes. And we're still need to copy paste a few more things in there, and then we're in the process of explaining the data set as well. So I have a section at the beginning of the data section just explaining what our data set is, where we got the data, and that sort of thing, so any of the readers kind of understand what we're using.
Okay, I mean, all that part is essential. But the big bottom line is, are all those results spurious or not? And maybe Jonathan, I'm looking at if either you or Amanda have been able to. I mean, you saw how I put it in slightly different terms. I think I had 3 kinds of analysis that maybe you've done, but there's not a line on this in the paper.
3 kind of analysis.
Correlations.
Oh.
Collinearity statistics, and re-estimating with different combinations of variables. You've done the third, so you've got different models, and those can partially permit you to look at consistency across the models. And then related to that is the 4th point, change. That is, I suggested using change, and instead of change, you put in 2 years, earlier and later, of industrial activities.
So.
And so you've got a strong coefficient of 1 that's positive,
right,
and the other is negative. As soon as I say that, my first reaction is this is just spurious.
Okay, so the manufacturing stuff.
I sent you this by email.
Yeah. No, the manufacturing stuff. I believe Mary is working on that. We're gonna change the variables, so she can talk more about that.
Yeah, I already ran the
Okay.
manufacturing instead with percent change in manufacturing jobs, just so
Okay.
it's more straightforward to interpret.
So that's
And what
that's fixed.
happens to the result?
I haven't looked at it yet, actually.
It was somewhat the same, but also somewhat not. If you run them without any interactions, percent change in manufacturing jobs has no effect at all. If you introduce the interactions, you see that an increase in manufacturing jobs by itself predicts Trump voting, not a decrease actually. And whenever you have unemployment, originally that's negative until you introduce the factor of race, then it's positive. So basically, once you control for the number of non-white people, increase in unemployment increases
No,
Trump.
but one thing at a time. I mean, the one thing to start with is the interpretation that is in the paper of change in jobs. And we had a lot of discussion about this for months. And the way it was measured in the draft at the time of the Midwest meeting was to have, what was it, year 1 and year 2. And you had an opposite sign for those 2 years.
So that was just for manufacturing, not for job
Right.
change as a
Yeah.
job.
Okay,
yeah.
but you have manufacturing in 2 years, but it's a way, but you interpreted this as decline in manufacturing generated the support for Trump. That's your interpretation. So I'm making the simple point, because these two things, percent manufacturing jobs in year 1, percent manufacturing jobs in year 2, across the whole U.S., across all the zip codes, they don't change very much compared to the cross-sectional variations, which means that you've got high multicollinearity between those two measures. So what's the R between the two measures is the question. Is one of the 3 ways of answering that question.
You mean between the 2 different manufacturing years?
Yes.
I don't have that handy. Do you have the data set?
That's
here?
what I'm saying. You need a skeptical reader will immediately. This is the reason I said don't show the people on the panel any of your data, because
Yeah.
they're gonna react this way.
So we did a correlation matrix much earlier in the kind of this process, and it didn't have the manufacturing data yet, because we downloaded that, I'm pretty sure within the last couple days before we went to the conference. But we did look at multicollinearity beforehand.
guess
You've got to
that's-
tell the reader with the numbers in the appendix, and even if it's not published, the readers include the people right here,
Yeah,
and
no.
yourselves. You guys got to learn some basic statistics to be able to write this. So I guess Eric has taken the lead. Eric, as I said, my main reaction is this is brilliantly integrated. I'm still applauding that Eric and you guys, I'm sure you all rewrote as well. You've been talking to each other, you've all got drafts, and you're all helping each other, and it's wonderful. And so, you've got what reads like an integrated whole. It's wonderful. On the other hand, you've got statistical potential huge potholes.
I guess that's
you
why.
all need to learn this, and need to learn what you can do to fill those potholes, because this is political science and statistics 101.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why I got rid of that set of
Okay, but
regressions.
don't just get rid. Show them if it's okay or not.
I guess
Or-
because
or-
it's
wait.
awkward to interpret whenever you have the 2 different years, so I figured having a percent change would
Yeah,
probably
no,
be better.
indeed, and that's what we talked about. But somehow Amanda or Jonathan implemented that suggestion, maybe because it's a standard score, and you then maybe have I don't know.
Implemented what suggestion?
Sorry,
We implemented what? Did you say?
you didn't put in a change measure as Mary's done. You
Well,
have-
I did both. So I did the weird one the first time and then I redid it, so,
Okay.
yeah.
No, but all of these are fine. At this stage, it's great to try out 27 different ways of doing it and compare the results. So Mary's seen us do this, and she's doing it like that, and that's fine. But put this in your log and say, I did it 27 ways, and I get the same results, and they're consistent. That's what we want. On the other hand, you say, I do it 27 ways, and I get 27 different results, and I don't know why they're different. That's a different story. Then we're saying the method completely changes the results. Okay, that's what we're trying to find out. Do we have consistent results, or are they volatile depending on the way that we estimate?
Okay.
Okay. All this was succinctly in my email
Yeah.
about 10 days ago.
Yeah,
But,
no, we saw it.
understand, you're sick, you deserve a little time. You've been rushing hard and fast and well for weeks and months, especially in the last couple of weeks. You performed fantastically, and you're still, you're doing great stuff, but joining this kind of stuff is what, so it means the alternative. I keep saying to Jonathan and to Amanda, who's not here, she hasn't come to most meetings, but I've written more to her privately. If we get your syntax, then Sam and Jacob can take your syntax and tweak it. They can do
Dave.
some of this themselves. And so that's why I'm trying to talk to all of you.
Yeah, and they.
So even if Eric has never, I don't know, if you never had a statistics course, I think? Even if you never, you can still, you're smart, you can understand 98% of everything I'm saying. And so that is, and you with watching Jacob or Sam, you can learn how to do this. But so 90% of the hard work is already done by Mary and the others when you get their syntax. Once you get the syntax, say, okay, here's what she's done. I'm more or less. So what Amanda has not done is annotate her syntax. So one thing I've said, I'll just say it here and make sure it's true. Look at Mary's law, because Mary always does it right. Okay, she didn't at the beginning, a couple of years ago, but now she always does it right. Okay, that is, so when you get syntax with say 27 lines, you explain to the reader. So if Eric reads Mary's syntax, Eric can understand what that command is doing. Then Eric can take it and he can say, oh, this is not so complicated, but I'd like to change this and change that. I'd like to do this in the West versus the South. I'd like to look at the way the South, or high-low on education. I'd like to add another term. It's easy for Eric to do this once you've got 98% of it already there. We do this all the time. So we have our statistical smart people way out in front. So Ben and Mary here. You are our statistical leaders here. All the rest of you, and Heason knows this. Heason, just to be frank, this is fine. Heason has never had a stat course. She's learned all of this in doing her PhD, and she did a PhD in basically 2 years. Okay, so that is, and she did it in part because she worked with other people in this room who were further along, and she learns very fast. And all of you Trumpsters can learn and do the thing. And so Heason, her thesis has got all kinds of fancy regressions and other stuff in it. And she's now getting, she is really more comfortable, but it reads as if it's done by someone who's, at the level of these very advanced people like Mary and Ben and the folks who are here, like Chris Braziel and so.
My econometrics professor has like a 1 7-page document that summarizes all the basic stat concepts that you need for this. So I can post that. I can put that in my Dropbox. That would be helpful.
Great.
These days I'm catching up with GIS.
Or put differently, there are 2 ways to learn statistics. You can take 5 years and learn all the grand statistical theory, and then you'll be a great theoretical statistician. And if you're majoring statistics, that's a great way to go. Most of you folks want to be political scientists and not statisticians, whatever. And so what I in a sense I violate that kind of beautiful statistical theory approach and say, run anything, just get started, try it out and do it, run some. And so you see, so Ben has got enough self-confidence. As you can see, he dives in, he runs anything, and he presents it the next day, and he says, I'll have it done by Monday. And he does, so he brings in something by Monday. But that's great, that's what I'm saying. It's that way we can critique and you can learn faster than if I say, you've got to read 3 books of statistical theory before you can do anything on regression. I won't, so I do the opposite. I'll try to help you run a regression by Monday if you need it by Monday, and then you can learn, then read more, then you'll make mistakes, as these guys have done, then you learn from your mistakes. But you got to learn from the mistakes, is my point. Eric should learn from mistakes, etc. and we don't, but I shouldn't say mistake, we don't know if it's a mistake. All the results may be completely robust and consistent, but we don't know until we examine Mary's new version of it. Okay, so we're teaching a little bit of statistics because it's, as you can see, it's a third at least of your trunk paper, and you've got to be able to defend this in discussion. That's a windstorm. When we've had folks say here from Japan, we had a guy he had a PhD from Japan, and he was coming here for job interviews at Japanese universities. The Japanese professors at 3 or so different universities were in the audience. Is the American Political Science Association, maybe 75 people in the room, and we knew, but he could barely speak English. So we helped him translate his paper. We then rehearsed him in English, but the main thing he was worried about was the question and answers. So what did we do? Learn Japanese.
That's a good answer. I like that one.
We thought we went through about 20 questions that might be asked by political scientists in the room. We translated them, we went over them so he knew what the questions were, and then he wrote out 20 answers in Japanese, and we translated them into English.
Wow.
Then we got some Americans who asked a couple of those questions, and we needed. He answered the questions very eloquently, and he got a job.
Wow.
So the Japanese didn't answer any, but didn't ask any questions at all, but they saw these questions, and they saw the answers, and it all looked like. So this is what I said to Ian. This is why you don't need to study foreign language. If you've got a little expert help on the side. All right. See, I did my PhD on academic politics.
I thought it was in humor.
Any more Trump stuff?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You made a comment. We've talked about this a couple times. You made a comment about R versus Stata, and like listwise versus pairwise deletion. When I run the same model in R and Stata, I end up getting the same number of observations with the same degree of freedom. Should I not worry about it then? As long as I keep getting the exact same.
No. I mean, they're using the same algorithm, but they're not that n. That is, you're putting an n of something like was it 13,000?
They're both coming out to about 18, 19,000 right
18,
now.
19,000.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the zip code n.
Right.
But you also know how many individual independent measures of Trump voting do you have? 18,000?
You mean the
No.
county level? About 3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So the maximum n you've got, if you're running this stuff listwise, is 3,000.
So that
So
wouldn't.
the 18,000 is wrong.
So that wouldn't show up. So in my regression output, when it says number of observations, that's not the actual number it's using.
Right. But that
I
is
think that you'd have to collapse your data down to be at the county level then before you did that.
no. Well, I mean that's one way you can go, but you can. I mean the program is doing it for you, but the program is confused because you're feeding it in 18,000 listwise observation. You got something like 35,000, but because you don't have full data for all the zip codes, it's knocking
So-
down rate 18,000. But your voting is knocking it down to 3,000. But the program, I mean, it's simply that the program doesn't report the actual lowest end.
So my question is, so the way that the data set is set up, so say there's 5 zip codes in county A, all 5 of those zip codes are listed as having the same Trump percent. So there's not actually missing values in that column. Is that still going to lead to this problem, or is that get rid of the problem?
Yes.
That'll still lead to the problem.
Yes. Exactly. I mean,
Why?
that is the little robot called Stata says, well, you told me you had 18,000 Trump voting numbers, and you fed them in and in the fact that you have Cook County and it's the same number again and again and again and again. I didn't know that. I just assumed there were separate measures, and I'm just a robot. So I tell you, you've got 18,000 cases, but
Okay.
you know,
Right.
the county numbers for Cook are identical. So
But-
you don't really have 18,000
So
cases.
But not
What-
every
3,000.
single variable is gonna be identical across every observation, because even though you have that many times repeat for Cook County, you have all the different zip code variations.
That's
So those
why
are
it
different observations.
It confuses the program.
So what?
But those are different observations in terms of how they're calculating statistical significance, in terms of how they're running the regression generally. They think that there's that many different people per se that are Cook County.
And because of that, you don't have as robust data as you think, and as some of those measures potentially imply. So you gotta be careful.
So what's the benefit of using, like when I run the two, they give the exact same coefficients, they give the same betas, so why would I, like if it says the same number, like the same degrees of freedom, same coefficients, does it actually matter which one I run it in, I guess I'm asking?
No, I mean,
Okay.
the difference, the fact that you use R versus Stata, that doesn't make any difference, but per se. That is, if you use the same thing, you ought to get the same results,
Right.
generally. But R probably, I'm pretty sure, has more potential for changing parameters in the way that you run these things than
Okay.
Stata does. In the sense, and that Stata generally is built by people who say never run pairwise.
Yeah,
Whereas R is gonna let you run pairwise more easily.
okay,
And so, but most of all, you need to bring to the results your knowledge that I've only got 3,000 cases of voting.
okay. And so,
And so look at potential bias, and even if you don't get it flagged through a significance thing, it will show up in, if you run, as the way you've done in your tables. So you've got, say, 5 independent variables, and 12, and 17, and 14. That is, if you find consistency across all of those lines, that's a sign we got robust results.
okay,
So that is not just the new variables, but the old variables that were, so for instance, if education and race are up at the top, if they start reversing their signs, then you've got signs that we've got
Okay.
inconsistent results.
and so if we start seeing them reversing their signs, would the way to check that to be run it in R, or would it be to look in depth at residual? Like what would you?
But running in R doesn't mean, if you input the same variables in the same model, you'll probably get the same
Okay.
results.
So then how?
But R, for instance, R might permit you to run this pairwise, whereas Stata does not.
Okay, so I guess that's what I'm asking. Are you saying that
And so,
R?
I didn't talk about listwise versus pairwise in my memo, because I assumed you were just gonna use Stata.
Okay.
And so you're adding an additional fifth or so way of trying, there are multiple ways of trying to go further, and heat map, but I'd start with the 3 simple ones that I measured, then you can go on to other stuff.
Okay.
I have a question. So, when people are doing Stata analysis, do they just use the VLab because the number of variables, the VLab,
You use the what?
the VLab,
VLab.
it's
Yep.
like
The virtual lab thing.
Yeah.
I have my own copy.
I have MP. You can.
You can talk
You
to
can
me about how
find
to
it.
get it.
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I can tell you.
Yeah, just because the variable limit, I couldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to
no,
you have to get the bigger version of Stata.
That was why I was like using
Yeah.
R.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably better to learn that if you're gonna only learn one anyway.
Probably.
Any more on Trump? Any substantive issues, or, and that is, I'd say these are the things, some political scientists will talk like the economists if we get them on this kind of stuff. And we had two folks that were straight political scientists at this same meeting about 5 years ago, and Dan Silver got very upset because they really gave him a hard time. And he wasn't, he said, oh, but this is the way we want to do it. And he went to Berkeley for college himself, so he was very, so I'm simply saying the best political, look at the APSR. You guys can't read the APSR unless you're on top of and better than we are in this level of discussion right now. That is This is basic contemporary political science.
APSR.
American Political Science Review.
Right, yeah.
And half the papers are at higher levels of statistical analysis than we're talking about. That was not true a couple of decades ago. It was, you know, it's written like the Wall Street Journal. But political science has become, parts of political science has become pretty high level econometrics in the last 20 years. And it's,
I'll see you in office hours.
good.
Thank you.
Any more Trump stuff?
We'll send you the draft we have in a few days.
No, actually, I sent you the op-ed draft earlier.
Oh, really?
Okay,
Perfect.
fantastic.
Along with my log and then the most updated paper
And
draft as well.
one that, again, maybe we should think and strategize how much, where and how much should we try to do next, and how much more time should we put in, either short term now in the next few weeks, and or what, I mean, where to go. And that there's no one right answer. That is, you've been super productive. We want to continue, but that is one set of things. That is, so we want to do some publication, yes. On the other hand, how can we add one or two more bigger ideas that maybe make the same general points, such as I've said 1,000 times and still not in the paper, something like 56%, whatever, of white women voted for Trump. Is that a scene? Now, it's not our normal, I mean, it's the opposite of a normal definition of a scene, but it makes the point that this election sort of result says, in effect, that is the women voters, white women voters, are the opposite of the sort of Wall Street Journal, Washington Post case study of a West Virginia town which matches one of our, what I'm trying to say is we want to have some dramatic, simple ways of saying there ain't no one Trump scene.
Yeah, I mean,
And
pretty
or
explicitly say that.
and how can we do that, and how can we add some individual cases, and maybe involving women?
So I want to point out the white woman thing. The Wall Street Journal articles that have been describing that are very much so mischaracterizing whether or not that's actually an important factor. There was 52% of white women voted for Trump in this election. It's the least percentage-wise of white women that have voted for the Republican candidate in the past 2 decades. That was very, very low compared to any other number of white women that voted for Republican candidates. So if anything, I don't necessarily think that would be representative of a Trump scene compared to any other typical Republican scene. We're actually seeing significantly less white women voting for Trump than they do for the typical Republican candidate. But I think we do have a section in the beginning of the paper where I think we have the opportunity to talk about that. That's the case study section that's currently unwritten. Right now we have a couple of different case studies that we kind of want to focus on and analyze, just kind of talk about. The ones we have right there right now, and I think adding something a little bit more broad like that would be a good idea, is we probably want to talk about something like the Long Island, New York sort of scene, the Michigan manufacturing counter scene, and the West Virginia coal mining scene. Do you think there would be value to talking about those very typical, just normal Republican scenes as well, or?
Okay, you're making three pretty important points. One is the traditional Republican model. We spent a lot of, Dan's especially focused on that in our 60 pages of draft.
Yeah.
There's almost none of that in the paper at this point.
Right, so I'm asking, do you want us to focus on the typical Republican?
Probably we ought to have at least a little bit on the normal political science model of party voting.
Okay.
Which is what Dan started with, and Mary followed that up as well. And they basically both showed there's a whole lot of consistency between Trump voting and past Republican voting.
Sure.
That's the opposite in a sense, that is, and then how to reconcile that with the differences by local scenes becomes more interesting if we if we leave the paper as it is and we don't even talk about this. We're going to be hit by the reviewers who are going to say, you don't include the normal APSR review, and it's actually, there's not that much. It's they're in other journals. I've looked at this in the last 10 years. But, So I'd say yes, we ought to have a little bit maybe in one paper, but at least in some place we need a little bit on that. Now, how much we want to do with that, I don't have strong views, but okay, one good point. Second good point is maybe women per se, and if we can get some more of how those have been covered, fine, great. Third point you made about some individual cases. Yes, I think those would be quick, good, and easy to add, but which specific places to choose is important. And I would say the more they can be presented as alternative, big, conceptually distinct locations, the better. Rather than choosing, I mean, the beauty in choosing those, say, those three places is that people know those and they've had a lot of media coverage, and that's great. On the other hand, if they don't illustrate strongly some kind of distinctive Trump scene that we've got measures for, then those cases have no relationship to our statistical analysis, and it weakens them both. Then we don't have a full case study of Long Island, and if we don't show how Long Island fits on the interaction terms and the other stuff, then we don't have an integrated paper anymore.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's no one right answer to that, but I would say think through that in terms of style and presentation. And so the stronger way to go is what Heeson did this. You saw Heeson handle this in class. I mean, I think most of you guys were in the class. She did the same thing that you guys did 2 or 3 weeks ago. She had the negative relationship with the different, that is, LA had a different relationship from all the other cities. And so she didn't have an interpretation. And I said, wait, if LA is that different, why is LA different? And she answered it beautifully. And so what you got was her 2 weeks of work, looking at the individual LA zip codes, looking at the means. She used very simple statistics, but she contrasted downtown LA, Hollywood, Catalina Island, and so forth. And then we in turn could try, if we say with Eric. I mean, Eric ought to know this stuff. I mean, what's the culture of Hollywood? How much are people in Hollywood, or maybe people who went to Hollywood, much less bohemian than the downtown artists who have graffiti all over their walls, as she showed, and who take the subway and the buses. Presumably, the Hollywood people and the people who drive from Texas to Hollywood stay in their cars in Hollywood, and they don't care about those buses and subways. Maybe. Okay, so that is adding a little. Heeson doesn't know these subtleties of the neighborhoods. I went to LA. I trained for a marathon. I ran in these neighborhoods because I wanted to see how different they were. And they're different. They're very different. I mean, you grew up there. You could write it. I mean, you could help Heeson, for instance. But Heeson is a shining example of what you guys could do with your cases. And that's more than you're talking about. Good point.
And so, in regards to going back to what you said at the beginning, though, just for instance with
that is, if we show in the paper a little, and Eric may have this in his head, just talking about something like, the difference between Hollywood, Catalina, and so forth in Trump voting. Now maybe normally I don't say do that. Normally we just want to use the county data, which we already have. But maybe if we've got enough of an interesting story, or someone's already done this, say this is an LA Times story, it's probably got Trump voting laid out within LA fairly easily. If there's something we could easily use to bring in, that is, use the case to tell the bigger national story is my point, or to illustrate the Trump case where, say, Hollywood may be an example of something which we've measured with interaction terms or whatever nationally, and use the case, join the case with the bigger story.
Yeah.
And Heeson did that.
So that makes sense. I wanted to ask, but when you say try to explain the white woman thing, like the white woman voting for Trump, how do we do that on if you the rest of our paper, right, is focused on very individuals. The entire point of our paper is to say that you can't just look at that one trait, for instance, white women, team dynamics.
Yeah.
So how would we incorporate that? Like, I feel like it's a little bit contradictory to what we're trying to prove.
No, I agree. So, I mean, completely. No one right answer. I would say maybe presenting it as a finding, saying this has been in the press, and even though this is, maybe even go to the maybe use it with the national elections as you did in your beginning comment. But then say, even if this is generally the case, nevertheless, if we add more local context, we can interpret more fully how, I mean, that is, we could potentially interpret more fully these patterns if we added, and this may be more data we don't want to use, but maybe we get this from Mary, turnout. That is, so I mean, those may be the survey of, that is, they may be the election, what do they call it, the exit polls, and we also have earlier surveys of individual citizens, you know, who are you going to vote for? And then third, we got actual voting by district, and so each of those are three different, and then we've got, turnouts. I mean, so turnout can be enhanced by white women who may say, yeah, I'm a white woman and I voted for, I did vote for Trump, but or let's say I support Trump, but I was too tired to go to the polls. So turnout may have well affected. But second, some of those white women who voted for Trump may have held their nose and only voted, whereas others may have contributed, you know, lots of money, lots of time, lots of volunteer effort, because they were excited. Okay, and it may be that those white women did so if they were in a West Virginia county. I don't know. You know, I don't have any. I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, that's something we can get to though.
But the simple answer is no. That is, in a sense, the white women are an anti-scene. That is, it's a national, simple kind of measure, but it's the way most political science or most voting is discussed.
Yeah.
And so in a sense we could say this is, I mean, but what it's powerful, what I've used it for mostly is to make the point that the normal national pattern of Hillary having all the women behind her is false.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And that would sort of fit into our narrative that like the national trend is not necessarily applied. I think the other way to do it would be to find this sounds bad, like the typical white woman scene, and see if we can sort of demonstrate that.
Yeah, but I'd say in general, maybe don't try. That is, rather than trying to make it too simple, I'd say maybe simply saying we know how highly varied white women live in many different kinds of scenes. So even if the national press reports it that way, if we want to go beyond and add subtlety to this, we need to add. But that is, if we want to do if we want to do this well, we ought to do a whole paper on white women. But it's too much work to do it well in the kind of thing. We've already got 85 pages,
Yeah.
and so I mean, so we can boil that down. But I would say, if we're thinking of this as one core draft, at least for sort of political science type paper, we've got to choose our. Let's talk through, think over where we want to invest more time and effort, and then do so carefully, adding things that can keep that beautiful integration which Eric and all of you have achieved.
I think that covers most of your questions for this
Okay.
week.
Great.
We're going to try to have a finalized version of the op-ed by next, and I'll try to get it to you before the meeting so you can look it over.
Okay.
I'm posting the MPSA luncheon video to YouTube as well.
Great.
Got your email on
Thank
that.
you.
It's just taking a while to upload.
Yeah, that, I mean, file that link took me over 12 hours to upload.
Yeah, it's still been going for a few hours.
So you gotta keep your, I guess you gotta keep your machine on the whole
Yeah,
time,
it's
not
fine.
non-stop, or maybe.
It's a little early, but when we submit the op-ed, we were wondering if we could do it through like your email because it makes a big difference in terms of publication.
Fine, that's fine.
To say that you're
With a significant one.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
but only college students.
yeah, we can handle that in whatever way, that is, I'm happy to be maybe last, or, well, whatever, but, it's clearly a group effort.
Also,
Yeah.
just side note, I emailed you about the grade, and I talked to the registrar. They just want you to be the one emailing them. I sent it to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you send me a draft, the course number, the
Okay.
date, you send me a draft of exactly what I do, and I'll say yes, and
Alright.
send it back.
Perfect. A++ for me then.
A++, there we go. Break their system. You said the guy broke the system. You track it down. Any more on Trump, or any more even loose things with, and these are all good points. There's no, and what's great is, I mean, we have discussion like this, and then and most of what this, I mean, it turns out better the way you guys write it up than in the discussion pile up, so it's great. So, yeah, Eric and Tom both.
I think for next Thursday for your class, you have the class reading or next Wednesday, you have the class reading our paper. Is there a way we can submit the most recent version up to Chalk?
Oh, sure, yeah, no, please do. Why don't you send that to all of us now, see Chuck.
I get sent to like Antoine, and he should be able to.
Yeah, once you do that as soon as you can.
Okay.
And, yeah, fine, send it maybe to me, Antoine, me and Antoine both.
Okay.
And just that, and well, do you guys wanna talk a little bit in that time slot?
I'm actually a discussant for that day.
Okay,
So
great.
If they wanna like talk with me at the time, I think
Okay.
they'll be in class, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe think, I mean, cause, I mean, you presented very well in the in the second section of the first week. Maybe think of, I mean, what's new, I guess, are the findings.
Yeah, we only talked about the hypotheses in the first presentation.
Yeah, but the other quick thing I was gonna say to you, just for another full presentation or write-up, probably a better way, especially when there's time constraints and space constraints, is to do it not in maybe the way that you literally interpreted a journal article, should be written by sections, but I'd say to present those 7 or so propositions and then present the findings right after each.
Okay.
Because you've now got 14 sections.
Okay,
And
yeah,
your head,
necessary.
is, you know, in 14 minutes, nobody can remember all
You
that stuff.
re-explain each one twice.
Yeah, so if you just say, and here's the logic of proposition 1, and we found it supported in all of our results. Proposition 2, our propositions were here, but we did not find what we expected, and here's why.
Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense to me, the presentation, organization.
And it's understandable, I mean, because you wrote the first part, then you got the findings later, but anyway, okay.
Do you want that structure for the paper too, or would you prefer laying out the hypotheses and then the data?
I'd say well, maybe some journals want the second, I mean, it's the more normal quote way to do it, but but the propositions are so complicated and so interesting. I would say probably,
I think for the paper, it's
I
better
think
separated, but maybe not, I don't know.
I'm still ambivalent, I guess, is my quick answer, but I would say, I'm worried about coming down, that is, I think for the listener and most readers, it's easier to have it integrated. On the other hand, it may be that a more standard, dogmatic is a strong word, but say dogmatic journal reviewer is gonna want all the hypotheses, then the data described, and then the findings.
Fair enough.
And if you only have one simple hypothesis, that's fine. But these hypotheses are so complicated and the findings are complicated enough, people are gonna forget it by the time you get to proposition 3 and finding 7, and you can't carry it all. Or that is, a corollary, maybe a way to do that, if you wanna go that route then, is to do a table that might show all the variables in the propositions, and then the findings matching that theoretical table, say in plus and minus sign, plus minus 0 signs if they're supported, not supported, or 0. I mean, that would flow into the findings more. That is, that would link the propositions with the findings in ways that the reader could then see a summary of all those propositions in a way that would directly link with the findings. And we did something like that in chapter 4, I think, of the new political culture book. As we look at the findings, then we have a section at the end where we say how much does this support our theory. So we showed all the theory propositions, and so we have supported, no, yes, and so forth. But I mean, if you try to do that in standard English, you'll lose it. Anything else? It's good stuff and gets better all the time. And I didn't make the explicit link to you before, but Eason's LA story, especially as Eric's from LA, think of how we can, do something like that to join the individual cases without doing a whole lot. That is, for instance, if you can find a good LA, the New York Times had maybe, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, they all had, they had some of their, I wouldn't say, that is, they had above average writing about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the election. And they had some high level, and they were so shocked, they were so blown out of their shoes that they really were scared, and and some of their staff writers really worked hard, and they analyzed the data, and many times more thoughtfully. I mean, the Wall Street Journal has generally become garbage. It's compared to when with the Murdoch people, they lost their good writers, and so they're stupid. They make mistakes and so forth in general. But there were some very good stories there, and similarly in the Washington Post. And so I was looking at all of these in that time period. And if you could find, and the LA Times is sometimes it's got better coverage now since the others have gone down so much. The LA Times might be good. Well, so I'm saying, look, don't be afraid to build on a good source, including one of these newspaper stories. And if you can join it with a place that you guys know, for instance, I can't remember where each of you from?
I'm from North Carolina, very close to like you keep talking about furniture manufacturing. I think I'm
right.
20 minutes outside of that.
Okay, so that means that, but that might be okay. Eric, you're where are you from in LA?
In Sherman Oaks.
Sherman Oaks. Okay.
So like the valley, kind of close to Bel Air.
Okay, Sherman Oaks is where Sage Publications was for years. Sherman Oaks, California, famous place.
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn. Okay, great.
I'm from Minneapolis, suburbs of Minneapolis.
Okay, so which suburb?
It's a suburb called Apple Valley, south of the cities.
South. Okay, great. Well, I mean, these are all that is, if you can find any of these where you've got something in a newspaper or someone who's analyzed these local areas and added some Trump stories, those would be, I'd say those are good reasons to build on them. But all good stuff. And Heeson's not from LA. I mean, Heeson put that together knowing nothing about LA. So if she knew LA, she could add lots more. Okay. Yeah, Errol.
I'll go ahead.
after we found this negative relationship and positive relationship of LA to walking, only after that we tried to search for the reason why it's the outlier. But like as a general sense, people are not really aware of that relationship. So
I mean, you're bringing in Catalina Island is wonderful. I mean, that blows them completely out of the water. There are no freeways on Catalina Island.
right, and there was a casino and also performance theater in that island.
Okay.
So there is still percentage of the artists within that island, which is the point.
I mean, another bigger point is Hollywood is like Las Vegas and Reno. And nationally, the places that have the most artists per capita are Las Vegas and Reno. Okay, so when we found that empirically, nationally, all this stuff about Flaneur, Paris, Baudelaire, it doesn't fit. So this is part of what I'm getting at. If you know a little bit more about Hollywood, Hollywood ain't the Latin quarter. Eric? Yeah.
So I'm just looking up an article and maybe something to look into. I can look into it more, but there's this one section in Hollywood that voted Trump for the first time, or like it voted Republican just barely, like 3 votes, but it was like the first time since 2000, and that area is heavily associated with Scientology. It's like right around like Hollywood Boulevard, like Sunset Fountain Avenue, and it's kind of wedged between. It's very small, only like a matter of like less than 400 votes, but that could be another avenue that could link into hypotheses about religiosity.
And I've taken my bike to LA several times, and I've biked all over LA. I've raced in Long Beach. I've ridden all up the coast and so forth. So you say it's not supposed to be bike and walking friendly, fine. But I can bike. I won't say I can bike anywhere. I don't bike on the freeways, but you can bike all over LA. I remember from biking, and it may be there's a huge, I think it's either a Mormon or a fundamentalist church that goes up a hill, and it's about 20 acres or something, going up a hill, and at night it's lit up. It's unbelievable, and it may be Hollywood or Beverly Hills. It might be Beverly Hills, but it's it's evangelical, religious, conservative stuff. So, that you've got that, but that is one thing. I taught at UCLA because I wanted to get a flavor of some of this stuff, and it's great. So yes, if you can find some of this written up in the local press, that would be good. At least that is, watch for stuff like this, and we can see where and how we might be able to use quick adaptations of what's in the local press. And we did this in Scenescapes. You've often got little boxes, and they could be mini boxes. We could have 3 or 4 of those in addition to, that is, you've got them listed as case studies. We can't really do serious, who governs type case studies. They're going to be superficial, mostly from the press. But if you've got something that you guys know because you've lived there, and you know more about other things that have been written about this, then that's why I'm asking how you can enhance a normal press story in ways that it can fit with the bigger themes that you're still writing about. Anything else? Okay. If you Trump guys are comfortable leaving, you're welcome to head along. As I'm also trying to keep everybody as healthy as we can and not detain you. That is, we can let the others, such as Ian or Mary or Martha, whatever, or I don't know, maybe you don't have much more to say. But Martha?
Well, I don't have anything to say.
Any
I'm happy to listen.
Nope, it's
Yeah, it's in the
uploading now,
process.
hours.
Okay, so,
Tonight,
as I
hopefully.
look at it, it is fine.
Great. I sent out, I think, Rick Gula
I saw your
email, so that's great. It went, you were a splendid chair, thank you, gracious, and you were very well focused. So, good discussion. Who else has things to talk about?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, do you have any suggestion for Andy and Matt Patterson to pursue after this publication? From conference to.
Yeah, let me think of how much I read and how much I rewrote and the other reactions of moving toward publication. I think, I sense the architecture probably is just about ready to send off. I have not, let me qualify. I have not read it as closely because I'm not a co-author. So, if I'm co-author, then I feel like I really look at this more closely. The other paper, Bohemia and so forth, is, I'm ambivalent as to whether and how much more to say about two things which I added briefly. One is sort of the international stuff. I have about a sentence now, and I say, look at Hisung's PhD, that is many of these same things hold in France, in Korea, and maybe a few more lines on that would be worthwhile. Even if this is mostly a U.S. paper. You've done so much work in it, and it strengthens the paper to see some actual results. So maybe a little more on that would be worthwhile. You can still publish 10 papers or 3 papers on the international comparison. 1, 2. Probably for all readers, it's good to add more of what and maybe rather, I have it mostly in the conclusion, but it may be better to put some of that up front about policies and mayors. Now, I did that today in the lecture, as I talked just about age. But, all these things have major policy implications if we draw them out. And it's often not that complicated to do so. But, and so both in terms of a general reader who's interested in, how's it relevant, what's the policy, and then second, for political scientists, as at the meeting, there were clear mayor's decisions. Such as just mentioning simply that Rahm Emanuel and Daley. Rahm Emanuel went in the triathlon. Daley was a serious cyclist. That adds a little bit of personal twist, which I think is worthwhile.
Do you think it's worth to mention about the LA in the introduction, like in the front?
What's the more general point about LA?
Some outlier about law.
Yeah, outlier and why we think so.
Yeah, well, okay. Here's a way to put that together. Another strong part of the paper, which is not discussed very much, is the one table which shows the differences in the 10 most important amenities and how they differ across cities. And that's a beautiful, very concrete illustration of how big the differences are city to city. I think they're even bigger than in Scenescapes with the 3 biggest cities. And so as I think I wrote in the text, I think it's there. Either I said it or I wrote it. That New York is the only place that has delicatessens. What were the 3 things? Delicatessens, maybe music, large music venues. Something that it has 3 amenities which are nowhere at all in the other 10 cities. Strongly correlated with Bohemia, and so that is getting a little bit of the flavor of how Bohemia works. And it's not. In part you can talk about city differences, but getting to a little more. Try to get a little closer to Baudelaire and Benjamin, and you'll never get there because you're not born speaking English. But Benjamin was working in a foreign country. He wasn't French. So now you can say French and German are relatively close compared to Korean, but push. And you've worked in Paris, and you've done this at a young age. I mean, you've done this, and you've seen the White Knights. I mean, you've interviewed the head of the. I mean, that section is perfect. I mean, that your presentation, that is, you added this in class. So this is not really written up in your thesis. These are you've added some excellent additions for this class, and you add more, and you added with those photos and your presentation of it orally, you added a sense of subtlety which is sometimes not so present in the earlier drafts.
No, I replaced the dates.
Yep.
At the bottom of the example.
You just sent me something in here.
You sent me?
Yeah, I just sent you an email.
See, Martha's very quiet, but she has had some big impacts on what we do. She sent me. I thought I knew about cafes. I can throw. I have French royals who've been in the cafe business, and so I've got this background, and I've written about cafe. Then she sent this thing from the New York Times. Wow! I mean, it totally changed what we were doing. There's a huge drop-off in the cafes in France. Okay, I mean, so you found a couple of major things, and then what you sent to Heason before, and Gary's arrogant, and that was beautiful. And so Gary versus Jane Jacobs, and that's become the title of your paper, basically. So
I'm delighted.
So that is, she's very quiet, but she's got a sense of subtlety, aesthetic subtlety, which we all need more of. And if we can add it through looking at Benjamin and some of these best things, and look at some of Theaster's videos. I mean, Theaster's got this in his bones. He just does it instinctively. Unbelievable good.
May I just suggest me that for the paper, we can include other cities, just like the same analysis that we did for Chicago. We could put in the Millennium Park, and see if that's only for Chicago.
Okay. I'd say a corollary of what I've said is, if you could, for publication, journal publication, if you could ratchet up a little bit your level of cultural subtlety and cut out the more simple stuff, the reviewers will say, publish immediately. If you've got, conversely, if you don't change it and you've got lots of, the higher the density, the more number of people who don't sit in the parking lot, people are going to say, this doesn't say anything new. Mm-hmm. And you remember way back when you made your first presentation, your first thesis proposal at IIT, what the tough guy who is now backing you, blocking his name, is from Yugoslavia.
Oh, Vedran Mimica.
Yeah, Vedran Mimica. Okay, I mean, he is smart and tough. We had presentations by all the PhD students, and each one was, he talked about them as so stupid, so bull. I mean, I was feeling sorry for all of it. Okay, and what he said about you was there's nothing new. Remember that?
You mean on this defense?
Long, it was a proposal. Like
Oh, yes, you
2
said
years
that.
before that.
Original.
Now, by the time of the defense, he was applauding for you.
Yeah,
But at your first proposal, he said there's nothing new. Okay, so what I'm saying is to counter people who might say that, edit out the stuff which is not new. You've got too much stuff which is old Jane Jacobs. Or not, I won't say Jane Jacobs, which is old, just the density stuff.
Yeah,
That's probably more for the thesis, but say within, that is, you can say the same things, and you've generally done this. You've done this, so that is, you know this, and I've said this 10 times already in different ways. But just write, change your language. Write in a way that is, and reread Benjamin. Benjamin just does this so brilliantly. Use more, and Marx. He follows Marx. Marx wasn't sure if he was making a mistake or if he was getting on risky ground. He'd write in a more literary style. You can do the same. Okay.
So for,
And so did the economists, Galbraith and Friedman.
more
They
general
use literary style as well
I
to
think
embellish their argument.
just be more short and try to be more concise. Just
Okay.
like the working papers.
But that probably we're talking about that very small changes, but I'm making I'm sort of raising the standard of my critique for you. We haven't talked about this very much before, but it's related with, let's say, with just two of you from foreign background now. That is, as you're, but both of you now are very subtle in your knowledge of English. Compared to 99% of the Koreans and the Chinese, and you're way up here. But, so, we're now trying to give you comments to help you, get better than many of them. You already write better than most Americans, and most American students, and most American PhD students, which is great. But you're not native English speakers, and you've got to work harder to get to the level, to move a little closer, let's say, to Benjamin. So this is for the other class. Read that Benjamin paper twice, or whatever. But that is, or what you can do, look at the book itself. That is, it's a distillation of a big book. And each of the points are made in a subtle, in a literary, polished manner. I read you just that little snippet. But they distill years. Half his career was invested in getting to those things. And they're right on the topic of your PhD and what we're still writing papers
I want to publish.
on. Now, okay. Well, okay. One more sort of related theme, which I don't think you've done, but which I thought of based on our overlapping presentations. You say you're the concepts of Bohemian, and we have measures. So in a sense, here's the problem with that is. Okay. So we got number of artists, and we've got the bliss point index. You could take LA data and show the differences. This would come out the differences between Las Vegas, Hollywood, that is, the commercial artists make a lot of money. But my hypothesis is they're not so bohemian. You can test that. So look at so these places are high. I think you chose them based on numbers of artists or bliss point?
Our cities are just the most populous cities.
No. Hollywood.
Oh.
Hollywood versus Catalina Island versus
There was the percentage of the art occupation.
Yeah, that's my point. See, that puts Hollywood way up, whereas if you look at Bliss Point, I bet you're going to knock Hollywood down. But I don't know.
Bohemian is more.
Yeah. So my point is, don't just put them in unilinear manner. Write about them with subtlety and say, here is why, the simple census measure omits culture in the form of the actual amenities, which we use for the bliss point, because it ranks Hollywood and Reno and Las Vegas above Catalina Island. Or sorry, that is, or let's say the downtown LA zip code with those artist warehouses. And that looks like a strong case. But look at the contrast the two indicators, and so again, I'm showing, this is very simple statistics, but it joins a more subtle statistical analysis with a more subtle, not just the style of writing, but the thinking about the Bohemian concept and how it's variously measured with our different measures. Does that make sense? Okay. Ian, anything else?
Well, I've started going back to marching band stuff. I'm pursuing a couple leads that I didn't get to last time, so I've emailed some people trying to get, like, I don't know, some kind of data from competition, statewide competition or national-wide competition results, and nothing's come up yet. I made contact with an anthropologist who did some work early in her doctoral career on marching band, on college marching band, and she sent me everything she had on that, so I'm looking through some of that stuff. But also, like last month when you emailed me a couple things to do, one of them was like find the cafe variable definition, and I recorded in my log, you know, where I ran into the trouble there, and I know, and you know, you said we could kind of rethink things if it didn't pan out, but do you have any idea of where to go next for cafe variable definitions?
Yeah, I think I went over that quickly. How far did you get? I mean, you went to the sources of Murdoch, but you saw his name. So did you go to those actual sources?
Yeah, so I went to one of his do files. It's for like broad categories too or something. And at the top, he said that he constructed these categories using a file from Sam Braxton. And so I found that file, and that ended up just being it just compared. So it's like, you know.
John, could we open the door, please, as we still got all you folks talking? Just trying to be explicit about contagion. Keep the doors open and the window. We don't have the windows open.
There's been a single cough this week.
I heard 2 coughs in this meeting.
No, not yet.
Do we have any, that is, how much does marching bands correlate with Trump voting nationally?
Right, and I so what's interesting is looking at like one of the big competitions, maybe the biggest one in the country, Bands of America Grand National Competition. I found some papers that done statistics on the bands that make the finals, and the bands that make the finals are like almost entirely Southern Texas and the Midwest. And so like so competition bands come from these areas a lot. And so thinking about then, they've also shown though that a lot of the bands that get
from my apartment, I can hear the folks in the high school across the street rehearsing. Do you get any black bands?
No. Actually, the same paper that did some demographic analysis said it's like mostly wealthier white bands when you get to this stage of competition, but they're.
But 100% or 90%?
I have to check what it is, but it's very high.
But that is, the Southern style is still infusing my Bronxville neighbors. So that still fits your point. But that is, or put differently, have you looked for, or might you look for marching band data in some source that we could download? And maybe the answer is you've done so. You mean you've done something in that, or is that just a paper you've read rather than seeing the actual data?
That's just a paper I've read, and from what it looks like, I think they just went and individually input the information. Again, so on the websites, there isn't a way to get the data, and I've looked at, I've emailed some people on like state levels. I haven't emailed the Grand National people yet, but I can email them and see if they have some kind of.
I mean, first just look on the website.
Okay.
That is, I've done this 30 times. Usually people won't give you more than is on the website.
All right.
But there's a ton of stuff on websites. If you look. when we downloaded earlier on, we had Christian rock groups, for instance. And we downloaded that. And even though it's biased in the sense that they aren't, I think these were Christian rock group concerts. So if you know where were the concerts, no, they're not in every zip code, but the fact that they are disproportionately in the same places as you have marching bands fits with one of our stories about Trump. So, put differently, if you've got four-way interaction terms, just imagine if you had marching bands as well. Maybe that'd pick it up even. So, if you find something like that, that would be good. Yeah, on the first point on the categories, I mean, you're still talking about secondary sources. You got to get back to something like what you did for China. That is, we want the census. That is, if we don't have it at all from, and so remind me, which countries are we talking about? This is, I mean, there are not very many. This is U.S., France, Canada, China, China, Japan, and Korea. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only talking about cafes?
Yeah, you wanted to know what kind of.
Maybe you just ought to go to those censuses. Go directly to the censuses. If you get it for roughly the same year,